So, this is the model I'm gonna be working with. This is just a basic kitchen island. I wanted to keep this tutorial as short as possible, so I didn't make anything crazy. But the principle can be applied to pretty much any model, so you don't need to worry about that. This is normally where I would start working on the high poly version. So this is where the 10 step actually starts. Is there anything worth mentioning? Oh yeah, I'm gonna be using the text tool, which is a cool little script that allow you to easily unwrap a model, and we are going to use a tool, which is this one right there, later on. So link will be in the description, but yeah, if you didn't already download it, I suggest you do so. First step is pretty easy. We just need to set every pivot point to be centered. So just select everything and center them to the object. Next up, we need to center the model in the world. So what I like to do is set a link to an anchor point. Oh, just need to unselect that. I just like to link everything to an anchor point and center that anchor point in the world. Now you don't need to worry about the z-axis. Just make sure that the y and x. Third step, we need to reset the X form of every pieces of your model. So in my case, if I take a look at the top part right there, this scaling is off. It needs to be 200 everywhere. I think those are off too, right? Yeah. So they need to be set to 100. Otherwise, it's gonna give you trouble. And one thing worth mentioning, we need to actually unlink everything. Otherwise, it's gonna give you trouble. And actually in my case I don't want to apply those mirror modifier as well. The thing is with reset X form, which I'm going to show you in just a moment, it puts a modifier on stack of everything and you can't remove it, otherwise it's going to give you trouble. So if there is any modifier that you don't want to apply right now, I highly suggest you remove it, apply the X form and come back later and just put the modifier that you just removed earlier. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. So as you can see, it puts this modifier on top of everything, but if I go into the scaling mode, you can see that everything's back to 100. So this is what we wanted. And if you want to apply all the modifier all at once, you just pretty much select this, apply an edit poly to everything, and just collapse to. That way you don't need to pick every one of them and just collapse. So that's a cool little trick right there. Fourth step, we need to make sure that the normal are facing the right direction. Otherwise it's gonna give you some bad artifact because it won't bake properly. So the way to do that, you just select everything, right click, object properties, by object, and make sure that little box right there is checked. Okay, and now we just need to do a visual inspection. If you see any face that are invisible, like you can see through it, basically you just go into the edit poly, select the face that's facing away, and just basically flip it. So this is what it would look like if it wasn't facing the right direction. So that's pretty much it. Let's move on. Okay, so now we are at the fifth step, which is going to be about unwrapping our model. This one I'm going to fast forward a big chunk of it because this tutorial is not about unwrapping. I might do one in the future, let me know in the comment section. But for now I'm just going to unwrap every pieces individually and I'm going to bring them back together And once I'm done with that, I'm gonna pause the fast forward and explain what thing you need to worry about in order to get the best baking results. So see you there. So this is what I ended up with. I just basically unwrapped every pieces individually. Like I said, I might do a tutorial on that, but right now there's only 4 things we need to worry about when unwrapping and baking normal. So let's just go ahead and open up the UV editor. First thing we need to worry about, we need to fit every UV shell into the 0 to 1 texture space. So we can do that easily by just using the padding option, the packing option. Second thing we need to worry about, we need to make sure that the space between every UV shell is enough. Like that it's too close to one another and it might gives you like some error in the baking. So we can just select everything and I'm gonna decrease that to 0.1. Like that it's perfect. But now one thing I don't like is it's only using about half the texture space and it doesn't really work with the packing option, so I'm gonna do it manually. I'll just fast forward it, but this is basically a matter of taking stuff and scaling them and just like a puzzle. So yeah. So this is what I ended up with. You can spend more time on that if you want to get the like the texel density right, but it's totally fine for me. Just make sure that you don't place something too close one another. The third thing we need to check is non-overlapping. between the UV shell. In our case, there's no overlapping. This part right there is not, this is not an actual faces, so this is totally fine. And finally, the fourth thing, we need to straighten some edges, so that way we get some clean texture bake, I mean. So if we take a look at this, those edges right there are not straight at all, and we need to make them straight. So we can I'm just gonna take a look, see if there's any more edges that are not straight. Doesn't seem, oh, there's one right there. So I'm just gonna select every edges. Oh, just select it. Select everything, loop, and I'm gonna straighten it just like that. And it looks fine. I'm gonna do the same with this. And that's pretty much it. Okay, so the sixth step is going to be about the naming convention. Substance Painter rely a lot on the name you uses on the low poly and the high poly version. So we need to make sure that those name match over the low poly and the high poly version. So one quick way to do this, which is basically, well, first of all, let me collapse this modifier. We can just duplicate the high poly version already, just like that. I'm gonna create a new layer for that. And I'm just gonna take everything, and under the tool menu, there's a rename object. Click that, and you will get this little menu right there. I'm gonna rename every pieces to attachment, and I'm gonna make them number. So what it does, it basically just change every name to attachment with a number. And I'm gonna do the same with the high poly version. Now before continuing, we need to make sure that they actually match the model, like they match the top part right there is the same name as this one, but it's not. So we need to make sure that it does. So this is 04, 04, 03, 04, 01, 02, and what about that part right there? Okay. There you go, now they match. Now the only last thing we need to do is we need to tell Substance which model is the low version and which is the high, and we just basically pick the low version. Uncheck those little box right there and just put an underscore low. Rename. Come on. Oh, forgot to check the box. And we do the same with this one, but it's gonna be I, just like that. So that's pretty much it. Okay, so next up we just basically need to work on the high poly version. So I'm gonna put some music on it and fast forward it. So enjoy. so now I'm pretty much done with the iPoly version. Didn't do anything crazy, just added a few details so that you can see that the bake is actually working properly. I think I've added some chamfer right there and on this side. Didn't actually turbo smooth this part right there because I think it's actually, well, it's smooth enough. And I'm not gonna bake those two because I'm not gonna add any detail to it. So yeah, let's move on. Okay, so the 8th step is gonna be making sure that the high poly version is probably lined up with the low poly version. In my case, it's gonna be pretty straightforward because I made sure to move pretty much nothing. So if I press that, there you go, it's probably lined up. But in yours, if you have a more complex model, you might end up with stuff that are not properly lined up. So one way to make sure they are, well, what I like to do is I just assign two different material, like that have two different color. Actually, I'm just gonna change this one's color. I'm gonna create another one. Oops. Just gonna go there. So if I just overlay this one on top of the other, it should look like something like that. Like you can see the face when I'm moving or kind of like glitching. It means that they share the same space. Now, of course, if for instance I've put on a chamfer on that area, of course it's not gonna pop out, but it's totally fine. You don't need to worry about that. Same goes for this, but the main part should look like something like that, like it's glitching out. And if there's something, let's say that's off, one quick little things you can do, let's say it's just a little bit off like that. Well, you can just pick it up, just click on it, and select the align option right there, and click the low poly version, and it's gonna line up properly. So that's one of the reasons why the first steps was to center every pivot point. So now if we ever, let's say, mess up things, we can fix them later on. So yeah. Okay, so this is the last step in 3ds Max. But before moving on, I just wanted to point out that I've added some chamfer to these corners on the low poly because I already tested out and it's gonna look better with those chamfer there. And this is actually I wanted to point out is that when you are working on the high poly, you don't really want to go. You want to add some fine detail, but not some big detail. Just like I did a really round corner right there, but in my low poly it's really sharp, so it's not gonna give you baking errors, but it's gonna look really weird. So this is something you should be worry about. But again, if you use this as a background element, it's people won't really notice it, but up close it's definitely gonna look weird. So you gotta be aware of that. So yeah, so the next step is gonna be smoothing the UV shell using the text tool menu. So just open it up, go into the tools and select that option right there. Ah, Jesus Christ. And just basically do it on every single one of your low poly model. Now mine doesn't work if I select everything and try to use that tool. I don't know why, maybe it's a bug, but it doesn't work if I try to apply all at once. So we are pretty much done with this. I'm just gonna go ahead and change the material to the default scanline material. Otherwise it's gonna give me a warning if I export it. Now I like to use the FBX format for exporting. but the OBG is fine as well. Gonna name it accordingly. Make sure you check that little box right there. And now we need to export the eye pony. I'm gonna unselect those two right there because I don't want them to bake. Export. It's gonna give me a warning. Yeah. So the last and final step's gonna be in Substance Painter. So see you there. So this is the final step to how to make the perfect normal map, and this is where you cross your finger and you hope that it actually works. So I'm gonna go ahead and create a new project. I'm gonna select the low poly, set that to 2K and press OK. As we can see, the smoothing group still looks weird, which is what we wanted. Just gonna turn that out a little bit. And I'm gonna go ahead and bake the normal map. So just go into the bake textures, none, check it back. Gonna set it to be the same size as the texture set. Deletation width, as usually set it to 16 or 32. And this is where we pick our eye poly model. Those two values are the one you are going to adjust the most. I usually start with a value of 007 and work my way down to 01. That way, well, not that way, but it usually fixes the issue, and if it don't, it probably means that the issue is coming from something else. So, and right there, those bugs should be checked, but make sure they are, especially this one. And under the match menu, make sure it is by mesh name and set the anti-aliasing to be 8x8. Now we can see like why at the 7th step we name them with an underscore high and low, because Substance uses those to differentiate which is which. And I'm gonna go ahead and bake it, so I'll be back in a few minutes. So the baking just finished, and as we can see, it's perfect. There's no artifact. Now it looks kind of rough on the edge, but this is normal. This is just a normal map. It doesn't change the actual geometry. And those look kind of fade, but this is because the resolution is too low for those small detail. I'll fix this by switching from 2K to 4K. But right now I just want to see if there's any artifact, which there doesn't seem to be. Yep, everything's fine. So I'll go ahead and throw the final. Actually, I'm gonna change that to let's see, I'm gonna try 0.1, and I'm gonna change the texture to 4K. So I'll pause and come back later. So the baking just finished, and just make sure that under texture set you set the size to actually 4K, otherwise it's not gonna display as 4K. And voila, the perfect baking. Now of course this is not like that complex of a model, but those steps that I showed you can be applied to pretty much anything, and I'm fairly confident that it's gonna give you the best results possible. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope you find that useful, and leave a comment down below if you think there's something that I missed out, or some settings that I didn't, explain properly. But yeah, I was planning on doing a tutorial on UV unwrapping, or maybe texturing in Substance. Let me know what you think about that in the comment section. So yeah, have a great day.